When did you know it was time to quit? I think everybody has a story about when they decided that they just wanted to hang up the towel. My story started years ago. I'm going to share why I decided to quit. And I want you to stick around until the end because I'm going to talk about something I've never talked about before, at least not publicly. So as you can see, this video is very different from the videos I typically post here on this particular channel. I'm going to take a very different approach. For those of you who are watching this for the first time, come on in, welcome, enjoy. My name is Patrice Davis, and I'm the founder and CEO of GrantsWorks and GrantsWorks Academy. GrantsWorks is a grant consulting firm. I'm also the CEO of Ready, Set, Go Consult, where I use my experience and what I've learned over the years to walk new independent and freelance consultants through successfully launching, growing, and scaling their own independent or freelance consulting businesses. If you like what you hear, feel free to describe. But remember, this video is unlike the other videos I've ever recorded where I share tips on how to succeed at being an independent consultant, about what should be in your proposal, about your services, how to amp up your lead generation, about automation, and all of those things. We're not going to be talking about that this time. We're going to talk about I'm going to be sharing my personal story of why I decided to quit. That is, why I decided to quit my last job, and even why I recently decided to make changes so I could work smarter and not harder. So, the first thing we're going to start talking about is my generation. So, I'm squarely in Gen X, and we'll talk a little bit about why Gen X sees work differently than, of course, boomers. And some say millennials and Gen Z also have their way or approach to work. These are all generalizations, but they pretty much make a lot of sense, at least for when I look at how they describe Gen Xers and how I also perceive work. So for those of you who don't know, I also have a podcast called the Age Has No Limit podcast. And that's where I speak to men and women that are in their mid 40s and older about some of the amazing things that they've done in their life. For example, there's the woman who's visited over 70 countries, the endurance athlete who lives with chronic pain, the former Wall Street and Silicon Valley executive who finally found her healing after she experienced a sudden change in her life. Now, I didn't bring up the podcast, because I wanted to, for a plug, right? But you can check it out right here on YouTube and, of course, on Spotify, Apple, and all the places where you can actually typically find podcasts. I brought it up because on one of the episodes, I talked about what research says about Gen Xers like me and some generalizations about how we approach work or our careers. To be clear, Gen X describes those of us born between 1965 and 1980. And according to the Pew Research Center, Gen Xers value independence in their work, expect and value flexibility, pursue education and all the certificates, right? We're always in the professional development game, right? And we are comfortable with technology, but we also remember having to dig into paper files in real metal cabinets. So we're also now going to talk about my work life. So I started out in advertising as a media planner. So after I graduated from college, my first job right out of college was at an ad agency in Baltimore called WB Donor and Company, and I think eventually just became Donor, DONOR. So I started out as an assistant media planner, not a full media planner, and did that for a little less than a year, and then they laid off a ton of people. Thankfully, like 2 weeks later, I was able to find a position as a marketing assistant at a publishing company that basically ran publishing campaigns all over the world, like literally, not all over the world, but many countries around the world. And after a few months in that role, a person was promoted. I was then able to get promoted into her former role, and I became a marketing manager. So I had a marketing and advertising background early in my career. moved to Atlanta. All of that I just described was in Baltimore, but then I moved to Atlanta and also continued working in marketing. I used to work for a marketing firm here that many of you are familiar with. So I've done both what we call agency work or agency side and client side work in the marketing space. And then when one of my children, well, all my children really, once they reached a certain age, I realized that the super deadline heavy marketing work, for those of you who have never worked in marketing, it's truly one of those industries where there's a lot of deadlines. I can only imagine what it's like now with digital marketing, online marketing, and all the things. I worked in advertising and marketing when they actually had, well, they still do, I guess it was mostly billboards and space ads and ads in magazines, ads in newspapers. So I literally used to do the research to figure out how much of our clients' budget could stretch for the kind of medium they want that we identified or thought would be the best place for them to place actual ads. So after a while, I decided, marketing wasn't what I was going to need, or actually wasn't going to be a good fit for my family life, and so I decided to resign from, my full-time marketing role as an account executive at a top marketing firm here in Atlanta, and not here in Atlanta, but it is in Atlanta, and went down to just 20 hours a week at a nonprofit. And I did that for 5.5 years. So in between, I did try to land another marketing role, part-time marketing role, and I did that for about a year, and that turned out to be a fantastic opportunity. I was able to travel to Cuba and just learn some amazing things about Cuban society and all the amazing things that that country's doing that we don't hear much about. But I did that for about a year and then decided to go back into, my role learning about grants. And that is how I actually ended up being, having the business that I have as a grant consultant. So, but those part-time years were tough financially, but I was able to pick up my children from school, be there for snacks when they came home, homework, projects, extracurricular activities, all the things. Many of you moms and dads out there know exactly what I'm talking about. So I have no regrets about shifting from marketing to a different industry altogether, which was, of course, managing, high dollar government grants for nonprofits, or shifting from my full-time role to part-time, because I knew that, basically this is what my life needed to be in order to be able to be available for my children. And I'm very grateful for the opportunity and and to be able to do that. So I'm going to speed this up. We're going to go now to 2019, and that's when I'm working for an organization that does amazing work that many of you are aware of. They do amazing work for young people around the country. I'm a senior director with 3 direct reports. So of course that comes with moments of growth, and I definitely had those, and comes with challenges, and had those too. But in that role, I don't know if it's because it was my first really managerial role. I did also have a role as a manager when I worked at a top research university in the Atlanta area. But I think it was because it was my first managerial role. I felt like it was a high visibility role because the person that was in that position, a lot of people liked her. However, some things happened and she decided to change her roles at the organization. I was able to step into that role. There's a little bit of tension around that. You know how that whole thing works. And so I knew, sort of eyes were on me to see how I was going to operate in this role. And then, of course, the direct reports had a really good rapport with the previous director. So it was just a kind of tricky situation to be in. But as a result of that and some other things that I know were more internal than they were external, I was overly worried about what people thought about me. I obsessed over my emails. I had to make sure there was the perfect wording, that the correct citation of the correct regulation. I was, like the top grants regulation person within the organization, so I couldn't be wrong. Like I had to read it, understand it, analyze it, and then make the best recommendation for the organization. So it was definitely a role where I couldn't take anything for granted. None of the details could be taken for granted. Obsessed about the tone of the email because a lot of what I had to communicate were, unfortunately, no, you can't do that. No, we cannot do this per the agreement, is all of this, over the top, highly formal language. But I felt like that was the role I needed to play, the person who I needed to be. And as a result, I felt like I was, putting on a mask because for those of you who know me personally, that's not who I am. Some people say I am, but that really isn't who I am. Not when when I let my hair down, I'm hanging out with my girls. That's not who I am. But when I'm in that space, that's who I felt. That's who I felt I had to be. Some of that pressure I have now realized I put on myself. But regardless, that was what I was experiencing. So I kept my cool, but I do remember having two big confrontations with my supervisor, great guy. Of course, at the end of it, he had a lot of respect for me. I did some really great things for the organization, for our team. And so I have, no regrets about my performance there. And I don't think anyone would have anything to say about my performance there as well. But bottom line is, I liked the people that I worked with, but I also felt a way because some of the things I learned in that role, that made me feel, I'm not sure if this is where I want to be. And I think what pushed me over the edge was the way that some things were being handled at that particular time at that organization. I'm one of those people really that I can't unsee what I see, right? I can't justify it in my head because I have clear boundaries on what I believe are right, what I believe is right and what's wrong. And if something turns out to be quote unquote wrong in my mind, I can't justify it to being right just because I want to feel comfortable. So that's just who I am. I'll face it either quickly or eventually, but I will face it, right? And once I face it and I don't like what I see, I'm going to bounce, right? So in December 2019, I put in my resignation. Some things were going down. I decided I don't necessarily want to be a part of what's happening because now I don't believe in what we say we believe in. I just put in my resignation. I'd already been looking for another position anyway and decided when I decided, y'all, to take a salary cut of $45,000. I'm just going to let that sit there for a little bit. I took a salary cut of $45,000. I was ready to go. Okay. I took a salary cut of 45 grand. When I told my friends, they were like, "You doing what?" So, but that's not the last time I quit an employer. I actually quit again, but I'm going to tell you all about it now. So the next job, I quit that after just 2 weeks after I got there. And that's because this job was trifling. It was just straight up trifling. And this is the part of the story that I've never shared, not in detail, but I'm going to share it today. So it was just downright trifling. It was a job at a well-known university not here. I'm not in Atlanta right now, but it's a well-known university in Atlanta. I won't name the university. Y'all, this university did not have anyone full-time in a department that typically has at least 4 to 5 people for a university of that size and funding of that size. The part-time director showed me an office, I think maybe the second week. She didn't show it to me the first week. The second week, it was an office full of old furniture, files, cleaning supplies, and all manner of junk that she had in mind for the second office. And guess who she expected to clean out that office? This is me coming from a senior director role with, a 6-figure salary with 3 direct reports. I took that 45, and some of y'all would say, well, you took that $45,000 cut. She probably thought that was what you did, right? But no matter what, you don't ask an employee who's a professional to come in and week 2, you're asking them to clean out an office. That's crazy. And to me, that was trifling. So, y'all, when I pointed out later on, outside of the office, right, some of the serious issues with not just necessarily my role, but the role of the office and just some things that I was seeing that weren't working well for the work that we do, and how handicapped the office was. Financially, it was handicapped. Resource-wise, it was handicapped. It was just not a good position for that department to be in. And all the mess that was going on, I shared all of that with her and she agreed. But then I realized she was actually intimidated by her supervisors to really advocate for what was needed for the university. And, I think my final gripe was, again, I've never shared this publicly. What I think I also learned is that the people who held the purse strings, and the people who could actually make the changes that were needed for that department. And again, this is one of them departments that you don't mess around with. You make sure that you have experienced people in that department, because there are a lot of things that could go wrong that could put the university out there in the streets, reputation tarnished, all the things. So the people who held the purse strings were all folks who were in their cushy roles and did not want to change, even if it meant putting the university in a better position, making sure the university was innovating in the way that it needed to, and implementing ways to be more efficient. I realized they were stuck and they were stubborn and they really weren't going to give this director the resources that she needed to make it a proper office. And I wasn't going to be there to play that game, right? I've already worked really hard to get where I needed to be, and I'm not going to push and fight and struggle to do, the most basic of my responsibilities. So, between the junkie office, her timidity, I believe she was just being timid. She knew what needed to be done, but she was timid. And I know a little bit more about why she probably was timid. And the stubbornness of decision makers, I knew there was no way I was going to stay, right? So I bounced. 2 weeks in, I bounced. And that's when I quit being an employee. That was the last time I worked for someone. And it's also why I'm working smart, not hard, working smart in my business, so I'll never have to be someone's employee ever again. So again, this was maybe, I think, at the end of the 2 week period. It's January 2020, before the pandemonium, and I'm sitting in my car with one of my close friends, and I'm telling her that I'm going to start a consulting business. I wasn't sure what that all entailed, but I just knew that, hey, I could be a consultant. I can find ways to get people to pay me for my expertise and my knowledge, and then, build a business that way. So she's a good friend. She cheers me on. I don't know how much she believed that I was actually going to do it, but she probably did, because I'm the type of person, if I say I'm going to do something, I'm going to do it. I may flake out about, our girls' night out and things like that. But if it's something that's, something really, really, I'll say, important, then I'm definitely going to move forward. So by March 2020, I wasn't playing, y'all. I had a website. I had a few services. I was trying to figure this whole thing out. It wasn't until May that I had my first client, and I charged her less than $500 because I didn't know no better. In September came my first long-term, role. I really was just a freelance operations manager for a company in Seattle, Washington. I really wasn't consulting, but it was, I was doing the work and my company was being paid, but not quite consulting. I wasn't making anywhere near my previous salary, but I was grateful. Of course, I had a lot to be grateful for. I wasn't sick, right? Like everything that was happening around us at that time, people were dying in droves, you may remember. My children were at home. They were, two were away at college, and then they came home. My son was there as well. I wasn't starving. We were, we were, figuring things out in our home. So I was pretty content. Now, I have to say, 4 years later, my company has earned $1.5 million in revenue. I've never shared that publicly before either. Now, I do want to point out that in year one, when I only had that client in May, a client in September, and then maybe, a couple of new ones at the end of 2020, I only earned about $35,000 in 2020. So when you think about it, that 1.5 million that our companies earned, my company has earned, was really over a 3 year period, 2021 through the end of 2023, actually through first quarter of 2024, right? I have 4 full-time employees who are fantastic teammates. And I also have 4 to 5 long-term contractors that helps our company with things like ad hoc consulting work, email marketing, financial management, HR, and more, right? I work and I travel. That's the part of the reason why I started the business. I didn't want to have to work for anyone anymore. That was one of the reasons. The second reason was so that I could, travel the world while I work and while I run my business. You guys have heard me. For those of you who've heard me, or maybe you're on our email, my Ready, Set, Go Consult email list, or you've listened to the podcast, Age Has No Limit. I'm always talking about the fact that, it was intentional for me to have this online business. It also happens that it happened when everyone was going online. So it made it more acceptable, I think, and easier, because all the tools and all the resources that allowed us to be able to work from home are the same tools and resources I was able to use to be able to run my business from anywhere. In fact, I'm actually recording this video while I'm out of the country. This background that you see, this white couch you see, I would not have a white couch, but it's beautiful. I'm staying at an Airbnb in another country. So I just wanted to give you some background on why I quit. I know everybody has their story. That's my story. But I also realize not everyone is in a position to be able to just quit, right? It was made possible. My being able to quit was really made possible because of my ex-husband. My ex-husband and I still have a really good friendship. And he was always there, I always call him a great provider. And as a result of his financial responsibility and the fact that he's a great provider, I was able to quit. Not everyone can do that. Many of you have mortgages, college tuition, and other financial responsibilities. And so that, can sometimes feel like, basically can limit your ability to do some of the things that you'd like to do. Some people, though, are finding ways to kind of, remove those financial burdens from their lives, whether they have a mortgage or not, and just still quit and change their lives. And some of the people that I meet and been able to get to know on the Age Has No Limit podcast have done that. In addition, I'm in a number of communities where people are sharing their experiences doing exactly that, y'all. So you do have options. If you've been considering it, just know that you have options. Now, if you want, if you can do it, if it's what you want and you have a plan for what's next, go ahead and do it. Now, I'm also going to talk about why I quit working hard and decided to work smart. So as I was building the business, there was so many things that I needed to put in place. And so I had to work hard. There were many late nights. I remember even working until 4 o'clock in the morning once. I remember some of those really, really tough, consulting engagements, not the staff, not the clients themselves, but the deliverables. And so it was the first time I decided to look at all the deliverables that we offer, all the services we offer, and peel away at the ones that were just too complex, too hard, too tedious, especially since I was the only one doing it at the time, right? So when you first start your own business, you're the only person, unless you're going with a partner or you're going with someone you already designate someone, and that's someone you can depend on being there to support your work. Maybe they're going to be the administrative support. Maybe they're going to be some kind of support. But for the most part, if you're going to be going in as a solopreneur and you're doing it all on your own. That's the invoicing, that's the marketing, that's the social media posts, that's the client delivery, it's the proposals, it's just so many different things that you typically have to do to run your business. And so you have to work really, really hard. However, as your business grows and you're able to add team members, you're able to breathe a little, and then you can start figuring out ways to be more strategic in the way that you work. And so now I'm in the point of my business where I'm not working in the business as much. I've been saying that for a long time. We've all heard that where we want to get for many of us, the goal is to work on the business and not in the business. So I do realize that the reason why I'm now able to say I can work smart and not hard is because I'm at the point in my business where thankfully there's support, and I now have to figure out what that looks like. if I'm not the person with the long to-do list, the person that's doing the client delivery and sitting on the client calls and all of the things that are client centered, what does that look like for me as a CEO? And I know what it looks like theoretically. Now I'm embodying that work. So that means my quote unquote to do list looks very different. It's focused on business development, on collaborations, on gaining visibility, on other business opportunities. That and so it's just been interesting adapting with an A to what that new responsibility looks like. So that's why I quit working hard and now I'm working smart, because this is the time to transition to working smart. And I have to say, guys, I'm really enjoying it. It also helps that I'm in this beautiful country and enjoying just some time to really think about my new working smart self, to think about what my goals are, my long-term goals are, about my purpose, and just really have that space, that mind space to that space really, and that time to really enjoy this time in my life. So I hope you enjoy my story about why I quit. I did not quit my business. I thoroughly enjoy my business. And it's a part of a larger plan and a larger goal to do some things. So that, quitting is out of the question for me. But if you like what you've heard, remember, go ahead and subscribe. Share this story with anyone you think that would be interested or would be inspired by my story. And, you know, again, subscribe and drop some comments. Like, I would love to learn if you're considering quitting and why, if you have a similar I quit story, or maybe you've decided, you know what, I don't want to quit. I'm one of those people who's, quite satisfied being an employee. Not everyone can and should be an entrepreneur, by the way. But, if you say, well, I enjoy my role as an engineer or whatever your role is, I'd love to hear from you as well, because, it takes all of us, entrepreneurs and employees, to, make our society run smoothly. We can't all be entrepreneurs, because then who will be the people that will staff our companies, right? So, but just wanted to share my thoughts, share why I quit, and just put it out there. Why I'm here right now. So we'll go back to our previous types of content that I share. The next video that I release will be about why companies hire consultants. So I'll take a really deep dive into that. But for this episode, you get a better picture into who I am and why I decided to quit and, just, throw in the towel. Thanks for listening.